Good afternoon. Okay, do we have to do that clapping thing again? Somebody did. Yeah, that's it. Good afternoon. I want to mention before I forget, we take your feedback very seriously, as I hope you can tell, those of you who were here last year and now you're here this year. So when you get that thing, what do they call that?
Well, we have a 2 o'clock QR blast.
Oh, there's going to be an e-blast coming at 2 o'clock. Meet Barbara. And then there's also that a QR code outside. It's really important that we get your feedback, because when we find out which, for instance, all kidding aside, which workshops you found extremely useful and which ones you didn't find extremely useful, we will not repeat the ones that weren't useful. So just know that. It won't take long. It's on SurveyMonkey. It's very straightforward. We're not asking for essay answers. But I want you to know how important that is to us. Okay, and also in the email blast are links to all of the PowerPoint presentations that have been sent to us so far. If there are presenters who didn't send them to us, then if you do send them to us, we can do a follow-up. So that's already there. Okay, changing gears. This is incredibly exciting, what we're about to do, because we're the first, I think, to do it. So like last summer, this thing came out. It was called forecasting, right? A forecast, which is sort of like the federal government saying, we're going to do this, and we're going to have this project, we're going to give away this money, but we're not doing it yet. We just want you to know it's coming. And then for 2 months, everyone goes, well, what do you think it is? I don't know. What do you think it is? And then finally, people apply, and then finally somebody wins the contract. And so in this case, well, I'm going to let them do their own thing. I'm trying not to do their thing. But the team, I will say, the team that got awarded this grant, there was only one team in the country. I mean, it wasn't like a multiple thing. And they got $30 million over 5 years to develop the first ever National Early Care and Education Workforce Center. Now, that may sound like a lot of money, but besides the 3 lead agencies, then there's like 150, I'm exaggerating, TA providers like ECEPTS who are part of this thing. It's a really expansive and really imaginative effort. And so because we're on the, sort of the outer circle of the inner circle, I was like, wait a minute, maybe we could do something about this at the conference. Elizabeth, I knew. I didn't ever meet these two. I was like, you all want to come to the conference and we'll give you the last lunch. They were like, yeah. I was like, oh my God, they said yes. And then Kim, you will meet, and she won't tell you this about herself, but she has been a real advocate and a door opener for ECE apprenticeship at the federal level and giving us opportunities. And she moderated this, or she pulled together this roundtable discussion about a year ago that Pam and I were both on, and Megan from Teach. So don't be fooled by her very sweet voice, because she is a powerhouse, and we need powerhouses like that. So that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to introduce Kim to say she's moderating, I'm eating lunch, and take it away. Oh, and there will be Q&A, so listen, keep listening closely so you have your questions ready.
Thank you, Randy. What a sweet introduction. I really appreciate it. And I'm really excited to be here with you guys today, and have really just been thrilled to be here all week to hear from you and the incredible work that you guys are doing. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about how the federal government is working to support and strengthen the early care and education workforce, especially from my vantage point at the Administration for Children and Families. And then I'm going to introduce you to who you really want to hear from. But as Brent said yesterday, the care workforce, and especially the early care and education workforce, is a really top priority for this administration. I work closely with our Deputy Assistant Secretary, Katie Ham. This is a top priority for her. We've been working really closely across agencies and within our own agency at ACF to do what we can to meet this moment and address the really long, persistent challenges, but especially the shortages that we know that people are facing in communities today. And I just wanted to say that being here with you guys really has been inspiring and given me like more oomph in what I think is a really daunting challenge that we face. It can really feel, it's tough when you look at the data, we're tracking the numbers and seeing persistent challenges, and we're hearing from Head Start programs and childcare programs across the country just how hard it is right now. And at one point during the pandemic, we knew that 90% of our Head Start programs had at least one classroom closed because of staff shortages. It continues to be a big issue. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, the SOC codes came up yesterday, but when we look at those data, we are still operating without 1 in 10 child care providers in this country, and it can be tough. But we also are really excited about the very incredible progress and momentum that is happening in this space. We see states and communities, tribal nations, local programs doing incredible things every day to try to overcome the challenges. And so it's been really meaningful for me to hear from you guys and see the work that you are doing that is that critical engine at the ground, uplifting our economy, our communities, our families, our kids, our workers. And so I'm going to take all the barriers, the challenges you've talked about, but also the successes and the really bright spots that you are back to my colleagues in DC. So Randy did ask me to talk about sort of the impetus for the center and what we're doing to support the workforce more broadly. So I'm just going to really quickly touch on our mission, vision, and priorities at ACF. I think what I want to point out here, this is what our cross-leadership team across Head Start, childcare, home visiting programs, preschool development grants, our early childhood office, is what we are sort of focusing on. And as you can see, what I think is important is that it's about children and families and what we want to see for them, but it's also really important that ACF has put on the vision what we want to see for the workforce. To be honest, in my 10 years in federal service, I've spent a lot of my time focused on kids and families and expanding access to high quality early learning for them, but this last few years there's been a lot more focus on the workforce, and I'm really glad to see that. Brent talked about how this administration started out with a really bold vision for major reforms in funding and in our quality improvements, wages, and compensation for the workforce. And we know that additional funding is significant, that is needed to address the challenges and create the kind of infrastructure that you guys have been working on and been talking about this week. We need a lot more of those resources. But I think what is Katie Ham is often saying to me is we also have resources right now. We have $22 billion in federal funding that are going out to communities. We need to make sure that we're using those funds well, and that we're improving our policies to make sure that those federal dollars are not supporting poverty level wages for our workers. So we are doing a lot right now to try to leverage those resources to promote compensation and benefits and working conditions, and this Workforce Center is a huge part of that. But we're doing some other things too, so I want to talk about those really briefly. So first, we really cannot talk about the early care and education sector without acknowledging the very important impact of the American Rescue Plan on the workforce. So even though the ARP passed over 2 years ago now, these resources are still available in many states and communities to help stabilize and strengthen the workforce. Stabilization grants, many of you probably know, have gone out to over 220,000 child care providers, impacting as many as 9.6 million children. We know that these grants really have been a lifeline that have prevented many child care providers from closing their doors, and some states are continuing to provide those stabilization grants. Others have already expended those funds, but states still have child care supplemental dollars that can be used to invest in the workforce and make workforce systems improvements. Head Start programs also have supplemental American Rescue Plan funds, and ACF has made it very clear in all of our ARP guidance and other guidance that these funds can and should be used for recruitment and retention of staff and developing staff, including through apprenticeships. So some of the ways that these COVID relief funds are supporting stability for providers and for the workforce are highlighted here on this slide. A lot of states are using these resources to increase payment rates for subsidies and payment practices, meaning things like paying for enrollment, not attendance, and also making timely subsidy payments, things that we know make a difference for this workforce. Many states are using these funds to do recruitment and retention bonuses. Over 100,000 child care workers, we estimate, have received some kind of compensation improvement with these funds. So this is a really exciting time. I know it's a challenging time, but it's also an exciting time where a lot of innovation is happening, a lot of new approaches and new investments are happening, and we're really excited about sort of learning from this activity and this growth for states in how they spend their CCDF funds, how they are working to improve the workforce conditions. And I think someone yesterday at the lunch plenary asked, actually in one of their questions said, we have been hearing from ACF about apprenticeships in their guidance. So I'm really glad that some of you have been reading it. We are trying to highlight this as a really important strategy within our efforts to address the workforce challenges we face. And I was really excited to be a part of a discussion with Randy and Pam and many in this room who I see. The National Head Start Association played a really important role in that too. And we've partnered with Department of Labor to share their technical assistance and research with this field too. So we're going to continue to do that. I'm pointing out a couple of the policy documents. Feel free to read them in your free time on the airport, on the airplane home. But really, I think it is important that in September, when we release the Notice of Funding Opportunity for the Workforce Center, we also, at the same time, released program guidance across 3 federal programs and talked about how you can creatively use those funds to address the workforce challenges we're facing. We've highlighted strategies like apprenticeships and others. We also, at the same time, released a Notice of Funding Opportunity for our Preschool Development Grant Birth to 5 program, and in that program we prioritized workforce compensation as something that we wanted to fund. We have been putting out a lot of Dear Colleague letters, and we put up a resource page on our ACF Early Childhood Development site where you can go and see strategies and best practices and state and local program examples and TA resource tools. So we're doing what we can to focus on this and really encourage states and communities to take bold action during this time. And Randy and Pam and Brenda and others who are here have been those bright spots that we've lifted up. So thank you all for the work that you're doing to be those bright spots. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but one of our Dear Colleague letters that we just put out in March highlighted new fiscal year 23 funds that can be spent on workforce. And these are funding that came through in the last most recent appropriations bill in December, and we've been working on getting these funds out to our grantees since then. Importantly, the Child Care and Development Block Grant received a $1.85 billion increase in fiscal year 23, and we do not consider these one-time funds. This is funding that passed through our regular appropriations process, and states have a lot of flexibility in how to use those funds. We also know that there's a lot of need for those funds, and we encourage them, we are encouraging states to use those to increase payment rates and support the workforce. One of the things I wanted to note is we are really encouraging states to use a cost estimation model approach to pay their subsidy rates based on the actual operating costs rather than using a market rate survey that will just reflect low wages back to you. I'm glad that people are excited about that. Using a cost model allows states to build in the cost of quality and build in a living wage. And states like Virginia and New Mexico and DC have already done this, and we have tools to help states who want to learn more about doing this. Head Start also received $960 million in federal fiscal year 23 additional funds, and that went towards a 5.6% cost of living adjustment and $262 million for quality improvement. And we're really encouraging programs to use those funds to compensate staff and recruit and retain. We're excited about the $2 million expansion in the Tribal Colleges and University Head Start Partnership Program, which allows tribal colleges and universities to establish and build relationships with Head Start programs and improve quality, sort of build that pipeline. And then the Preschool Development Grant Program, I already mentioned this. We did in January award nearly $300 million in new PDG Birth to 5 grants to 42 states, and the omnibus bill had $25 million in additional funds, so there will be some opportunity for states to sustain and expand those that work in the coming year. One thing that I was really excited to see is nine of our preschool development grant, renewal grant awardees proposed to either establish new or expand apprenticeship programs in ACE. So that'll be really fun to see. Maybe some of you are part of those efforts. And now for the exciting part. So, building on all of the exciting new potential of the funding that folks are using right now in states and communities, the work that's happening in tribal nations and territories, in local programs, and because of the persistent challenges that we continue to face, HHS announced the launch of the National Early Care and Education Workforce Center in February. It's $30 million in a cooperative agreement over 5 years. Like Randy said, it sounds like a lot of money, but there's a lot to do. Over the past couple years, ACF has had a lot of conversations with child care providers, with Head Start staff. We've had conversations with folks in this room that have really identified that we need to have a more dedicated, targeted, and coordinated effort to tackle this challenge. And so this is the impetus for the Workforce Center. There's a really urgent need to leverage our existing technical assistance. We have research efforts that are out there. We have findings that are coming in that are really important, but we need to build on those and fill those gaps and spur more innovation. And this Workforce Center is going to help guide us and move us towards a future where early educators and providers actually receive the compensation and other supports that reflect their value. We're especially excited that it's a joint and integrated approach to technical assistance and research and kind of bridging those gaps. We also, I wanted to note, a lot of folks here have talked about how challenging it can be at the local level to blend and braid funding streams to make the work happen. We are trying to demonstrate by pooling funds across different federal programs how we're doing that at the federal level, and it also is a workforce issue that does not fall neatly into one of the program buckets. This is something that affects everyone from family child care to home-based to center-based to Head Start to schools to TK in this state. So it's really important for us that it is, oh, you got a preview of my next slide. It's really important that it is an integrated approach across programs. So I was going to stop there, but yesterday someone asked Brent about how we're working together across agencies, and I mentioned earlier that we have been working to highlight apprenticeships across agencies. We also, we partner with Department of Education on expanding access to public service loan forgiveness for the early care and education workforce, and we partner with the Small Business Administration, many other agencies on trying to address and tackle this challenge. But I was really excited to see that just a couple weeks ago, President Biden signed a very sweeping executive order focused on care across the life cycle, from young children to people with disabilities to seniors. And this is a whole of government approach with more than 50 executive actions that will be implemented by HHS, Ed, Department of Labor, USDA, VA, SBA, OPM. I could go on. It's really significant that nearly all agencies are called on to take responsibility for this. It's not just an ACF thing, which we are consistently pushing for. It's something that we're working together across agencies on. And there are some highlights for HHS that I've mostly touched on already, but I'll just briefly mention. We're working on increasing child care provider payment rates, wage parity for Head Start teachers, reducing child care costs for families, making Head Start and child care more accessible, improving mental health for the early care and education workforce, support for federal agencies in providing child care as a supportive service to federal contracts and grants, streamlining processes for tribal early childhood facilities. We have a lot of work that's already underway that supports what the president has asked us to do, and you're going to hear more about that in the coming months. So with that, if I can get my thing to work, I'm going to move to introducing you to our important panel. So first, I'm just going to introduce Chrishana Lloyd. I'm going to pull this up and make sure I get it right. Chrishana is amazing. Chrishana is the co-director for research in our new National Early Care and Education Workforce Center. She's the director of research at Child Trends, and I'm so honored to get to work with Chrishana, and I'm excited for her to tell you about how the center is going to improve recruitment and retention for the workforce.
I am super excited to be here. I'm putting my timer on because everybody sitting up here probably knows that I am a huge talker. So I hope I can get through everything. And I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to talk about the Workforce Center goals, how we're structured, and a little bit about what we plan to do for year one. And I'm going to talk to you about myself because I heard, as you know, I'm kind of sitting in these sessions and in other venues too, people want to know who the heck is leading this center. What do they think about? What's top of mind for them? What their priorities are, right? So it's about the center, but it's about the people who are underneath the center too, right? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, and then I'll introduce you, and I'll talk a little bit too to my colleagues Tonya Coston and Elizabeth Pufall Jones. So what can I tell you? Let me just start a little bit with the center. So it's a 5-year center, as Kim said, and for all intents and purposes, it started at the beginning of this year, right? So we're new. We're really, really new. There's 6 core partners. There's Child Trends as what we call the prime, right? And we're leading the center operations and the research, and I'm heading up that research piece. There's a Center for the Study of Child Care Employment, who Elizabeth is representing, the Build Initiative, who Tonya is representing, and Tonya is heading up the TA, so we're kind of co-directors on that end. There's a research at Berkeley, there's a research to practice piece, which Kim talked about, right? That person who's heading that up is Elena Montoya. She's not here today, but Elizabeth is representing her, but I'm sure you'll hear her name a lot. We've got the University of Massachusetts at Boston as a core partner, the University of Delaware, one of my alma maters, as a core partner, and 0 to 3. So there's a lot of people in the mix. That's just the core partners, right? And then we have a bevy of secondary partners, All Our Kin, National Association of Family Child Care, the Donahue Center, Advance, someone was here earlier that I met, whoop whoop, ECEPTS, right? Prenatal to 5, Fiscal Strategies, the National Workforce Registry Alliance, right? There's a ton of people at the table, never mind all of the people that Kim just mentioned at the federal level who are involved, right? So there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen. I'm telling you this, so be patient, right? We're new, okay? We got a lot of people to talk to. But I'm gonna put this slide up to tell you a little bit about myself. And a lot of people who know my name know me through this work, the Mary Popper Papers, okay? Thank you. So let me just tell you a little bit about that. I am a black woman. I identify as a black woman. I am the descendant of people who were enslaved and who were slave owners. Okay, I have some Guyanese roots mixed up in there too, right? So I'm out on Flatbush Ave, waving that flag at the parade every now and then, dabbling a little chicken curry, right? Not curry chicken, chicken curry. All right, and roti. All right, I'm the mom of 3 black boys. I have 16-year-old twins, one who has cerebral palsy. He's physically disabled, he's non-ambulatory, he's in a wheelchair, he is developmentally disabled. He doesn't speak, but he communicates with an iPad. His brother, his twin, is typically developing and giving all the stinky vibes that a 16-year-old does. Basketball playing, soccer playing, right? And then my younger one, my baby, is 11, and he is 100% me, right? So there's a lot going on in there, if you know me. So God bless the family and us. We're bringing a lot to the table. And if you just hear that, right, the mom of 3 boys, like, you don't even have to say anything and you know what that means, 3 black boys, right? Race is really important in this country. It's important to me. It's important to my family. One of my colleagues, Mary Louise Hemmeter, you all might know her name, she's a professor at Vanderbilt. She uses my family as a case study in her classes since the time I met her, which has been over 10 years now, maybe close to 15 years, right? And she used to call me up every year and say, is it okay to do it? And I would say, ML, when something changes, I'll let you know, right? And not something changes with my family, when something changes with the system. Okay? She's not calling me anymore, she's just continuing to do this, right? So there are things we need to work out in this early care and education system. I've dealt with early education, I've dealt with IEPs, expulsions, suspensions, formal and informal, right? Kind of those under the radar ones, with home-based childcare really being the saving grace for me and my family, and I've heard that in this conference today. I've been an assistant teacher, I've been a Head Start student, I've been in Montessori, I've been in FFN, right? So the range of early care and education is really, I get it, is what I'm saying. I really get it professionally, and I get it personally on many different levels. So this Workforce Center to me is not an intellectual exercise. It's not a game to me. It's not a resume or a CV builder. This is something that is really, you get emotional, really important and dear to my heart, okay? So, in this country, right, I think when we think about the descendants of enslaved people, and we think about the work, this picture kind of says it all. This is a black woman. The name of the papers is Mary Popper, and it's a play on Mary Poppins, right? Because in early care and education, pauper, if we think about the word, is poor, right? And so this is what we need to keep in mind, and this is how we need to ground ourselves in the work. To support people who do this care work, black and brown people, we need public investment. We need investment that recognizes and honors early care and education professionals and other caregivers, in a system that really was kind of built on the backs of these women, right? And still is being built on the backs of these women. You can look around the room and see who's in the room. Okay? We had families stripped from us, and so in thinking about why people do this work, we're gonna talk about recruitment and retention, right? It's not just about money, right? The way that people stayed whole in these situations was protective. A lot of times people entered into care professions, whether it's nursing, whether it's early care and education, whether it's human services and social work. I'm a clinical social worker by training also, right? There's a deeper meaning to that work and an understanding that we bring to that work around family and around connectedness and about care, right? That we need to put on the table and we really need to understand in these pink professions as we think about kind of recruitment and retention. There's lots of principles that kind of undergird the work of the center, and I won't go into them because I'm talking for too long. And let me just jump into that. But I just wanted to ground you a little bit in the work. So what are our goals? What are we doing in the work? These are kind of broadly what they are. We're thinking about systems, and systems are really important, right, when we talk about early care and education. And we have 5 policy areas, which I'll show in a second, really created and developed by the Center for the Study of Child Care Employment that frame the work that we do, okay? What else can I tell you about it? We are looking for innovation, which has been wonderful to be here. I'm an apprenticeship newbie. I didn't know much about it. I have learned so much in my past few days being here, and I really thank you, Randy, for the invitation to be here. My mind has been blown, and I called up colleagues yesterday and telling them how excited about all of the things that I heard and what we have to bring back to the center. We're really concerned about the well-being of the workforce, mental well-being, physical well-being, right? And the environments that people are working in, which we talked about a little bit last night. And also improving equitable access, right? Those Mary Popper papers, a big part of those papers is really thinking about the ways that racism, sexism, capitalism have really impacted our field and impacted things related to equity and access and compensation and other things, right? So those are kind of the goals of the work in the center. These are the 5 policy areas, and I won't go into them because I know I'm running out of time. But this is what we'll be focusing on in the center. What's important to know about these is that these 5 policy areas really focus on things that are measurable, and they consider things that directly impact the workforce, okay? And these are things that impact the ability of the workforce to thrive, not just survive, right? So this is what's kind of gonna guide some of our work. They're generally measurable at state levels. And if nothing else, I've heard, from this conversation and the meetings that we've had here, context is really important and states are very different, right? So we want to be able to measure and understand things that are happening at local and state levels. Here's our org chart. It's crazy. Said I was going to talk about the structure, right? Where to start. So there's the leadership team there. You can see me in the blue. Elena's in there. There's Tonya over there in the orange. And you see the different arms. I think what's important about this slide is there are lots of players, which we talked about, right? And it's divided very nicely. The blue is the research. The purple is the operations. The research to practices in the green. I want to walk you through it, right? The orange is on the technical assistance side. We have that big blue box at the top, our integrated project team. And at the bottom, our Learning Through Action Consortium. All of those are really feedback loops. They're points of collaboration. They're ways that we're going to convene and talk to each other and to bring together all of the other national centers that are in the country that may be working directly, sometimes indirectly, on issues related to the workforce. We are going to be that convener, right? We are, as Kim and Amy said, all things workforce all the time. And if you think about this busy highway and on-ramps and off-ramps and all of that, like we're hoping to bring all of that together in the service of the workforce. So that is the org chart, and happy to talk about it later if you want to. Okay, so what have we been doing? Because people are like, come on, we haven't heard anything. What's happening? All right, remember I said we just started, right? And this is just kind of briefly. It's been 5 months, not even really 5 months. We got some money. Then we had to figure out how to allocate the money. And the money came a little bit late, right? See? Okay. All right, we had a kickoff meeting with HHS, where we really tried to dig into what it was that we said we were going to do in the proposal. And you know, when you say you're going to do something and then you think about how you operationalize that and how you implement it, and I've heard that in the room here, things get a little messy, right? So we're still figuring that out. We had a retreat with our core team, all of those people that I named. We all have similar philosophies. We all came to this work with equity in mind. We all came to this work with a desire to strengthen and to support the workforce, but we have different cultures. We have different organizational standards. We have different ways of operating. So we needed to get together and be in the same room to figure that out. And we still haven't figured everything out, right? But we spent some time together. We submitted work plans, 160-something pages of stuff. Thank you, Kim, for reading through all of that, and Amy and everyone else at HHS, right? But that was a big undertaking in submitting those work plans. We're still getting them approved. We're still thinking about it, but those were for year one, really thinking about what we want to do going forward. And we had that big blue box at the top, our first integrated project team meeting, right? When we're hearing from people and bringing people together to think about how we want to move forward. So that's a lot to do with so many different people in such a short period of time. But that's what we've been up to so far, and we'll continue to keep you informed. Here are our anticipated year one activities, and I'm going to pass it over to Tonya to talk about the technical assistance piece, and then Elizabeth will talk about the research to practice piece, but you'll see there's a research and knowledge development, which is what I'm heading up, and here's some of the tasks that we'll be doing, we anticipate doing for the first year. There's a big leadership coordination and partnership piece, which is about that convening and bringing people together that I discussed. And then there's a communications and dissemination piece, right? There's no good in doing all this work if people don't know what it is that you're doing, right? So we're gonna build a temporary landing page, so if you're curious about the Workforce Center, you can come and check us out and see what we're up to. We'll eventually, at the beginning of next year, have a firm, permanent one. And then we'll do some branding around the center and launch the hub, which is really exciting, which is a place where people can come and not just find out what we're doing, but actively kind of participate in activities there. And Tonya will talk a little bit about that with the communities of practice. So I'll step away for the moment. I was only like 3 minutes over. So just tell her.
I'm sure you guys are all feeling how I am, which is I would love to hear Chrishana talk a little bit longer, so we will hear more from her. But you are also going to love hearing from Tonya Coston. She's the co-director for technical assistance at the new center, and she's housed at the Build Initiative. And really excited to hear from you, Tonya, to tell us about the very multi-level approach to technical assistance and the various ways that you all and people can plug into that work.
So the one thing Chrishana didn't mention in the newness, we as the leadership team, we sort of met. So I joined Build 3 months ago after 24 years in state government. So I'm new to Build and I'm new to this partnership, and good thing, like we teased last night, it's a good thing we get along because otherwise this would be a whole mess. You know, am I gonna get this? Oops, I think see, this is why I shouldn't click on stuff, but that's okay.
I think I can help you.
Sure.
Oh, no.
And it's okay. I have my notes, so if it doesn't work, it's all right. So, like Chrishana, to tell you a little bit about myself, so I am a single mom with 2 typically developing teenage boys. And like Chrishana says, yeah, They don't listen, they smell, and I am the smallest person in my household, so that should give you an idea. You know, with my 16-year-old who decides, every so often he attempts to like pat me on the head, and I'm like, that's not gonna work out for you. Pop, pop is not gonna save you. So on the other end, I'm raising 2 black boys, but I'm also caring for my 83-year-old father, who I tell everybody is my worst child. I cannot take his stuff, and he doesn't listen, and unfortunately, I just have to live with that because he does not listen. So I came into this work from corrections. I spent a couple of years working with the Department of Corrections, and I decided to go upstream to figure out what was happening. Who was pushing all the people in the river, and how could we make a change? So 24 years ago, I joined the Department of Education, where I started off in K-12, and then I moved into early childhood. Obviously, like lots of people, I became invested in it when I had my own children. And I was committed to building a system in the state of New Jersey that was not only good for those kids, but was good for my kids. So my children attended the state-funded preschool program for which I helped to build. And some days I think like, yeah, that sort of backfired on me because they have all kinds of answers that I am not interested in them using on me because I'm mommy and that should work, but it doesn't always. And like Chrishana, family child care, my son, I tell people this story, they're different. My oldest son, we went to a NACE accredited program because I was like, oh, it has to be the best. And it was great. He loved it. He loved his teacher. We went to visit her for several years after he left because he loved her. My youngest son sat at the door every day crying. And either I picked him up, he was crying, or he was sitting in his brother's lap. Because if he saw his brother go by the door, they had to stop him, and he would sit and wait. And so my neighbor had been a home provider, a family home provider. And I said to her, I got to go to work, but I can't be at work concerned. I can't go and he be sad and know when I leave him that he is sad. And so I drove 30 minutes past my job for 3 years. Because day 1, he cried, and day 2, he reached for her, and she became Aunt Riri to this day, and he's 13 years old. So I understand. Yes, it is just a resource that is so under-recognized and underutilized. Some of it is due to the structural practices that we implement in states, but it is definitely a lifeline for many families. That they need. And I also recommended her to one of my colleagues when she was looking. And I said, let me tell you, she is gonna overfeed your kid, but she's gonna love them. She is good. And she was. Some days I would pick them up and they're out watering the grass, you know, as they wash the car, all kinds of things. She allowed them to be themselves. And it was just a great opportunity for them. So as we think about the center and TA, we are here as like there is no one single strategy. We don't have money to give out, but we have a plan and we want to be a support to help you from the program level all the way up to the state level figure out how do we make this work? How do we sustain and scale all of the efforts that we know will benefit the workforce and the families and children that they serve for years to come? So in our work, like Randy brought up, ECEPTS and many other are partners with us. So we'll start off with what we call universal TA. That's our broadest reach. So that'll be like webinars, that'll be our multimedia products, that'll be our national campaigns, all those types of things where people get to come and really just to get to hear about some things, have some sparks in their minds, send them back to think about, hey, I think we want to do that. From there, people will have the opportunity to participate in targeted TA. And these are going to be our community of practices. So with this, if you've come to a universal TA or webinar and you thought like, hey, this is going to be really interesting, I want to hear more about apprenticeships. However, our state or our program is just starting out. That's going to be one strand of the community practice, but the other strand of community practice will be for states, communities, tribes, everyone to kind of come along who we're in the middle of the road. We want to expand. We want to sustain it. We want to figure out how to make it better. Because like I did hear about some of the programs, they were like, oh, we have it for pipeline, we have it for leadership, we have it for different things. So there'll be lots of opportunity to come together, take a deeper dive, look at what the research says, but also look at what partners say. So that's another one. And then we're going to have what we call our intensive TA. This is one-on-one, where you get a TA specialist that's a part of my team or myself. We'll work with you about a specific thing that you want to do. So, for example, we know Ohio is using their PDG B5 renewal grants about loan forgiveness. If they were having some struggles, they could call us up and talk about that. Like, hey, we were using this as a retention method. We're having some barriers. How could you help us out? Can you connect us with someone? So those are how that would work. So that's what we sort of look at. So that's kind of how that works. And when you think about yourselves, I know you're thinking like, well, how does that work for us? Well, we're doing this first year. It's going to be always an all call. That means everybody can show up. You don't have to be at the state level. You don't have to be at the county level. You can be an individual program. And the commitment is that you have to come with a partner. We want you to come with someone that you work with, so when you go back, you have a thought partner and someone who can help you carry the load to move the work forward. So that's really how all of you will have an opportunity to come into the work and interface with the TA Center. It's really, because we don't want to miss out on that innovation, because we know there are some states, they're not doing stuff. But at the ground level, lots of innovative things are happening in particular counties or a particular program, like all of you who shared. We're talking about the work you did and what it took. So we really don't want to miss out on that. So that's why we're doing these all calls, and we're going to make people teams on the back end. So everybody who shows up from Missouri, we're going to connect you. So when you leave, you have a new table, and you can invite people to that new table, and you will have the resources and the support to move it forward, to give voice to it. So that's really how we look at the big picture. So just some examples of our community practices that we're thinking of, and we're meeting with our other partners to really help us flush out what all the different tenets of those should be. So we'll be looking at developing salary and wage scales, improving workforce data. We'll be looking at system strategies to improve working conditions. We're going to be looking at how do we create inclusive and equitable pathways and partnerships, and that's definitely where we see apprenticeships coming in to really help change what we think equitable pathways look like. And then, of course, we want to think about how do we center this whole workforce in a larger system. Like we know we've heard about in different sessions, the language that we use, what we don't know about. We're always that little number of all the things they say happen, but we are the foundation of what makes the world go round. Because if people don't have care, you can't go to work. If people don't have care, I mean, like as an employer, what happens? Your people are not productive when they have to figure out, I got to get on the bus and go 2 hours to get across town, and they don't get to be invested. If the staff is getting together after work, but I know I have to pick up my child at 5:45, and I got 2 buses to get to. So we have to figure out how do we center the workforce and everyone that it touches to make sure that it is a system that works for all, not for some, not for those of us who are educated, not for those of us who are wealthy, not for those of us who are connected, but for the entire system. And I always say to my kids and my family when they talk to me about them, because my son at 13 is like 6 feet tall, why doesn't he play basketball? Because he doesn't want to play basketball. He plays the violin, he plays soccer. And if that makes him happy, it makes me happy. I want him to have access to do what he feels is going to change the world for the better. And however he gets there, that's what we want. We want our families to we want them to be successful. And we are not here to define their success. If I want to stay in the classroom for 20 years, fine. But if I want to teach at Yale, we should figure out how do we help them do that. So we want to make sure when we talk about this retention and recruitment, and I know it sounds crazy, but we have to make sure we build people for what is to come and not what we see right here today.
You guys are both making me tear up. This is really exciting to be here. So I'm really excited to introduce now Dr. Elizabeth Pufall Jones. She is Director of Preparation and Work Environment Programs and leads research and knowledge development. I got it wrong. We talked about this, how hard this title is. Director of Preparation and Work Environment Programs at the Center for the Study of Child Care Employment at the University of Berkeley. Is that right? Close enough. And she also leads research and knowledge development work for the new center, and we're really excited to hear more about the research to practice activities. Sorry about that, Elizabeth. I tried.
It was a complete word salad, and I don't really know how I'm going to follow up Tonya and Chrishana right now. Kind of a downer. But I'll speak a little bit about where I come from, too. I am a mother of 2 girls, 11 and 8. The 11-year-old is big emotions that I am constantly navigating and negotiating with her, and as people that went to dinner with me last night know that I negotiated a little bit of it right before I sat down with them at dinner last night. And the 8-year-old is a wonderful, boisterous child that can't quite figure out, why does her sister get everything? And I keep saying, she doesn't get everything. You get just as much. And we have lots of questions like that. But they both also had very different early care experiences. I have a background in early childhood education. I was a educator in an infant toddler classroom, and I followed them from infancy through toddler until they graduated and went on to the preschool. I also have taught in preschool classrooms. I've been a mentor teacher. I have taught early educators in college classrooms. And I thought, when I have kids, this is going to be a piece of cake. I know exactly what I have to do to get high quality care for my kids. Of course, I was completely naive. So for my first daughter, I could not find care anywhere for her. And I had to call on my mom and one of my friends from college who was out of work at that point in time. And I brought them in to take care of my daughter until I could find a placement for her in a family child care, which I think was about a year later. So for a year, figuring out everybody's schedule so that I could go to work. And then she had a wonderful family child care provider, Jenny, who we actually went and took a little trip to visit, and it was really fun to see her just a month ago. And that was great, but then Jenny decided her life had changed. She closed her family child care. And so then I have my second child, and I'm like, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm gonna do with this one now either. And I called in my friend from college, who was again out of work at that point in time, which I was not thankful for her, but I was thankful for me, and my mother. My mother is actually at home helping to care for my children right now, so I could be here with you. She's 83 years old, so she's been doing this for a while. And then they were both like, we're old, we can't be doing this anymore. And so then I actually went to somebody that I found in the neighborhood who was an unlicensed child care provider, paying her under the table to take care of my youngest one. She ate candy and watched TV all day, but I knew that she was loved by Miss Jeannie. And I was like, that's your experience. And then finally, when she turned 2 years, 9 months, she got into a center-based care. And then that center, during the pandemic, I actually went and worked as a teacher in the classroom during the pandemic at that center because she was having such a hard time finding educators. So I know this space really well as both a parent and as somebody who educates, but I'm also a researcher at heart. So here we are. For the center, we're very excited because there are a lot of TA centers that are out there, but this is one of the first centers to combine research and technical assistance. And so we have this very interesting piece for the center that's called the Research to Practice team. And this is a set of activities that cuts across the centers, and it's led by Elena Montoya, who's at the Center for the Study of Child Care Employment. And it's through these activities that research, policy, and practice are coordinated so that research findings are translated into actionable information that can be used for TA and used by staff and stakeholder audiences within the TA, and so that the TA can then go back and inform the research. So it's this nice feedback. I should have had a feedback loop up on the screen, but that's okay. But it's this nice feedback loop where the TA will constantly inform the research and the research will constantly inform the TA. So with this goal in mind, and as well as one of the other overarching goals for the center to elevate the voice of educators and our workforce, our year one activities will focus on cultivating and coordinating relationships with proximity experts, those closest to the work of caring and educating children, and the people and organizations who support them and facilitate strategies for change. So this will include developing an educator leadership board and a research and policy fellowship program, as well as working with our consortium of partner organizations. So engaging with educators, partners, and fellows to ensure activities remain relevant, contextualized, and educator-centric is the critical part of the research to practice. So the educator board will be made up of educators from across the United States who will advise the center and the work we are doing, such as offering feedback on a research report that we put together, or they'll give us feedback on our TA work plan that we're putting together. So they are essential to ensuring that the work we do is meaningful and impactful to the workforce. We're very excited about it. The research and policy fellows will be part-time, and this is really, really important to us because they will be part-time, ensuring they can still be active in the workforce while exploring this career pathway of policy and research. And the fellows will have the opportunity to work with our partner organizations, and in particular with Child Trends, and with us at the Center for the Study of Child Care Employment. So we're still working out the details of how to become a member of the educator board and or a policy or research fellow, so stay tuned. There will be probably applications, and we'll put out blasts. We also have some really interesting original research in the works for the first year that will focus on developing our understanding of recruitment and retention and building career pathways for the workforce. And this agenda includes understanding and documenting ECE apprenticeships in order to translate them in the work into policy and practice. And we will hopefully begin this work with ECEPTS, documenting their institutes and their work as intermediaries. So we're very excited for this work. So I feel like I should.
I see the excitement in the room as these three amazing leaders talk, and so in just a minute we're going to turn to you all for questions, because I see a lot of excitement. I'm sure you guys have questions, but I am going to just start out with a first question to you all. I think it's already come up a lot how important equity is in the work we're doing together collectively. And I just want to ask you to kind of hone in on that more, talk more about how the center will address equity. You've definitely already started to talk about that, but there's a lot there in those plans. Pull them towards you to go on.
Like that? Yeah. Okay, great. So we are thinking about equity not only as an outcome, but as a process. And so we will be keeping equity as a lens for everything that we do. In particular, like for example, thinking about research to practice. We will be using this lens to look at the context of the current field. For example, the purpose of a research study on an apprenticeship program. We need to ensure that the research questions will be meaningful for TA, as well as understanding what's going on and who is involved. So we'll be looking at questions like who is participating, how do they or don't they look like the rest of the workforce, what's the impact of the program on their well-being and on their compensation, who is the program successful for, what was the outreach strategy, and all of this will matter for how to translate the findings into TA and to ensure access for all educators.
And then for TA, we'll take that type of information and start to look at, when we thread it through our TA, helping those who are going to hard places. So we know there are places where you can't use the language, nobody it can't be listed. We still want to make sure we're giving them support to how do you make sure that you are meeting the needs of low opportunity communities, those who have limited access. So we'll be taking the information that is found to be able to really thread it through our TA so that we don't allow the use of language to stop the work from moving forward.
I have one more question, but Randy also informed me that it's close to time to cut this off. So I'm just going to ask one more question for the group, which is, we have talked about that one of the biggest challenges for the sector is persistently low wages. And so can you talk a little bit about how the center is going to address that compensation challenge, which is a big one?
So I think it's like a twofold. When you think about like the research, what do we know, what do we need? And when you think about TA, the arm of that is really helping everyone like we did today and we shared in this all across these last couple of days. What are you doing? Where are the barriers? And how can we help you maneuver them? And how can we help give you voice for what needs to happen next in your individual context of your state and what you want to advocate for? Because we're not here to advocate, but we're here to help.
Yeah, I think what's important too, just in that conversation, is we know, and I probably alluded to this in the beginning when I was talking, that we're not going to get to a point where the field is adequately compensated until we have a huge federal investment, right? Is that me? They're like, stop it. Stop buying.
Just pay the educators, come on.
But I think, that's really what we need, right? We need a wholesale investment so that early care and education is really part of the infrastructure of this country, as is K through 12, right? I think in the absence of that, like our role is knowing that everything is state specific, local specific, as Tonya said, is to really think about and to provide the resources, the innovation, the research that's on the ground that really helps us to understand how things are working, how to blend and break, how to take those monies and sustain it. They're good examples, right? I'm in contact with folks in DC all the time, New Mexico, like they're places that are doing the work. And what I want to be sure that we understand from this is that those places that have been successful have been working on these issues for 10 plus years, decades, right? So there's no like magic wand, and there's some contextual things that have to happen. There's some synergies that have to happen politically. And frankly, we have got to be the boots on the ground. Like we got to be in those ballot boxes, and so the center, I'm so super excited about the center. I used to teach social policy
I'll pass it, I think, to Sandra. Thanks, Sandra.
So what a way to end. What a powerful, powerful panel. Thank you so much. Thank you all for staying. And I'm going to just say you guys stayed to hear another poem. Is that what we got going? So I do want to say that sometimes what happens is the little people don't get acknowledged. And about 5 people said that I needed to do another poem. So this is for about 5 people. But before I do that, I want to just do a couple of acknowledgments. And we all had a wonderful lunch and breakfast, so I'm going to give us a chance to move. Please stand if you presented a conference or a lunchtime panel. Please stand. Thank you so much. We want to acknowledge your time, your effort in putting your presentations together, putting your stuff up on CVent. If you haven't done it, we still want it. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to see everybody's pictures up on CVent. So thank you so much. We know that you didn't have to do this. Some people came from far away. Some people flew in for the day. Some people drove in for the day. But we really appreciate you. We couldn't have done it without you. Okay. So I want to ask also for East Bay YMCA, will you please stand? So I want to just acknowledge the YMCA East Bay team because you guys are ongoing collaborators and supporters of us. Anytime we ask, we are running a special program. We're doing a deep dive. Pam, can you be here in 15 minutes? It's whatever we need, and we appreciate you guys are always there for us. Thank you very much. Okay, so if you registered and attended at least one workshop, that means everybody in the room, please stand. All right. Thank you, everyone. We would not have been able to do this without you, seriously. Everybody has dollars to spend, but not a lot of dollars. So you make a choice when you decide to spend your dollars with us. And we really do thank you. If you did not have a commitment to change this world, we would not be in this room. So thank you very much. I don't know if we have any of our conference people here. Are they? Okay, I just give them a shout out. The conference staff helped us put all of this together, running in, giving out adapters, giving out clickers, helping us get connected, and helping everybody get registered. So we want to thank them very much as well. Okay, ECEPTS team, please stand. We are missing one person. I just want to acknowledge her. She is not here, but she is an amazing part of this team. And this is a team full of superpowers. I won't go into all of them, but these are very committed, passionate women, and we work very hard to make it happen. So thank you, ECEPTS team. Okay, are we ready? All right, let's take it home. All right, a great conference has come to an end. There's no more time left to spend. We made it, we did it, we're wrapping up. Is it too early for a drink in a large cup? 1 full day of pre-conference learning and 30 amazing workshops. Keep Randy's words in your mind and don't lose momentum and stop. Thank you for all your focus, energy, and participation as we work together on ECE Apprentice Manifestation. The apprentices who spoke really warmed my heart and really encouraged me to do my part. And here are some wonderings I have. It was fantastic to see people outside of Zoom, but why did it take me so long to walk to my room? I was in Lake Arrowhead and Lake Gregory multiple times, but I never saw a lake and no one brought me wine. In closing, I'll say, I truly believe this battle can be won. But for right now, stick a fork in me because I am done. Thank you, everybody.
Come on up, says Chrishana, if you have a question. We're here.